Welcome to the Creativity Shell Bunny Bag Sewing Tutorial. For this project, you will need one 18 by 10 inch canvas material, one 18 by 8 inch cotton material, two 12 by 6 inch canvas materials, these are for the ears, and about 12 6 by 3 inch cotton materials. These materials were included in the Creativity Shell Bunny Bag Sewing Project Kit. You can also find them online at www.creativityshell.org. There is also a large cotton piece included in your material kit. Please put this aside and we will work with this later. Let's begin. Let's start with your large canvas material and those small cotton pieces that you have multiple strips at. We are going to go ahead and fold these right sides to right sides, and we are going to lay them against the edge of your canvas material. You can lay them side by side, you can lay them on top of each other. Just go ahead and line them up along the edge of your fabric. If you find that you have too many of them, you can go ahead and fill in those empty spaces or the middle gaps between the different pieces of fabric. These are just going to be used as decoration for the top of your bunny bag, so whichever way they are assembled, it doesn't matter as long as they're all filled in. I'm going to go ahead and also grab some push pins and just pin them into place because I'm going to need to sew them onto the canvas fabric and I don't want them to come off when I put them on my sewing machine. So just grab a few push pins and just pin them all along the edge so it holds them into place. Right now also, I'm going to use my marker and give myself some guidelines just to show you exactly where we're going to be sewing. This really could be just a basting stitch. We're just sewing them on at this point so that it holds those little strips into place. And because there are so many of them, we don't want them getting all over the place while we're trying to complete this project. So just sew straight along those little guidelines or along the edge of this fabric. And now we're going to just sew along the edge of those strips and sew them directly to the canvas fabric. If you did put some push pins in here, please remember to take them out as you're sewing along. And as you can see, I like to pin lengthwise when I'm sewing, especially with children, because if we're not accustomed to sewing over pins, this is a great way to remember to take them out before you go over your needle. Once those strips are sewn onto the canvas, we are going to grab your cotton piece. You have two cotton pieces. This is going to be the smaller one. We are going to put it onto your canvas, right sides to right sides, and you are going to sew that cotton piece on the other side of that canvas, not the side that you sewed those little strips to. I've added a few push pins to hold the fabric together, and I already had guidelines on this, but this is exactly where you're going to be sewing. Starting from my X all the way down to the end of this fabric, you're basically attaching the cotton piece to the canvas piece. Now remember, when you start sewing, always start with a back stitch before you sew along your lines or your edges if you don't have guidelines. Once you've attached the cotton piece to the other side of the canvas piece, you should now have a canvas side with those cotton strips and then a solid cotton or printed cotton on the other side that looks like this. Do not forget to remove your pins if you added pins to hold the fabric pieces together. Those two narrow canvas pieces or cotton pieces that look kind of like this, they are going to be used to make the ears of your bunny bag. You are going to go ahead and just open it up and then fold a small edge on one side and then fold it over towards the middle of the other side. I'm pinning them to hold it together like this, and where that fold is where I'm going to go ahead and sew right along to stitch these two sides together. I'm going to do this to both of the ears. I'm going to fold it down on one side and then grab the other side, fold it down about a half of an inch, and then fold it towards the other edge of the bunny ear. I'm using my hands to just give it a nice finger press and putting some push pins in here to go ahead and hold it together. Remember, my seam lines are going to be right along that middle fold. And when I'm putting my pins in, I want to push it in and just make sure it comes out the other side and then back through to the front side, just like this. When I'm sewing the ears, I'm going to change my stitch and use a zigzag stitch just to make it look a little bit more decorative. You don't have to do this. You can absolutely use a straight stitch. I'm just using a zigzag stitch because I would like to have something a little bit more decorative on my ears. When you sew the first ear, you're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing to the second set. So when you are finished, you should have two bunny ears. And once you are finished sewing, there's my zigzag stitch. Doesn't it look pretty? We are going to go ahead and fold these ears in half just like this. You want to have the folded side on the inside and the smoother side on the outside. Now, my bag should look like this. I should have my top cotton pieces together, I should have a solid canvas piece, and a printed cotton piece at the bottom. I'm going to fold my ears going towards the inside of the folds, and I'm going to put them on the right side of my bag just like this. Now I have a larger cotton piece that's about the size of both the canvas and the cotton piece sewn together. I'm going to place it on top, facing right sides to right sides, just like this. And I'm going to put in a couple of push pins, especially where my ears are, so I can hold those ears in place so when I'm sewing it, they don't move around. Because there is so much fabric here to sew together, I am also just going to draw myself a couple of guidelines so that when I start sewing, I can make sure that I'm capturing all the fabrics that I need to sew. My guidelines right now are about 3/4 of an inch inside. That gives me enough seam allowance to make sure that I capture the canvas fabric, those small cotton pieces, the ears, plus the top fabric on top of this bag. It's a lot, but we can do it. And now I'm going to sew along the length of that fabric to connect my large cotton piece together with my canvas piece and the small cotton pieces that I started sewing from the beginning. Once I'm finished sewing the large cotton piece onto the fabric, my bag should somewhat look like this. It doesn't really look like a bag just yet, but it will very soon. Now, what looks like a really large rectangle with ears and fabric and everything coming out of it is really our bag starting to come together. We are going to fold it towards the longer side of the rectangle. If you can see from my bag, the canvas piece that I started with and the small cotton piece, that's going to be the outside of my bag. And that large cotton piece towards my right side is going to be the lining. I'm going to need to sew close together my outside pieces, which is that pink part with the sides and the canvas attached to it. I'm going to sew along that line, and then I'm going to sew all the way along the length of that big rectangle. This is really important because the lining of your bag needs to stay open so that we have some space to turn this bag inside out once we start closing it up. If you find that your fabric is not lining up, just go ahead and refold it so that the edges of the fabric come together like this. Also, because there is so much fabric, go ahead and use some push pins and pin this fabric together. You do not want it moving around once you start sewing because it will throw your entire bag off its grain. Once you start sewing, make sure that the bulk of your fabric is going towards the left side of your sewing machine. This means that you should start sewing from the lining of your bunny bag, going all the way down towards the canvas and the shorter cotton side. If you find that your fabrics are kind of coming apart or they're not lining up, go ahead and readjust them. When you get to the center, if your fabric is kind of bunching up, lift the lever, put the fabric under the foot, and put the lever back down and continue sewing. Remember, this is a lot of fabric that's put together in this project. If you need to readjust, feel free to do so at any time. To make your bunny bag have that kind of boxy finish to make it stand up, you're going to need to do a step called mitering your edges. Your first mitered edge is going to be along the folded edge, and the other is going to be along that long rectangular seam line. You are going to use your ruler and measure 3 inches down from the top of the edge. When you open up the sides like this, you should get a triangular shape. That 3-inch marker is going to be where your line is going to be, your guideline, and you're basically going to draw a straight line across that triangle from edge to edge. This is where you are going to need to sew to give your bunny bag that boxy finish at the bottom, just like this. I'm going to also use a push pin to hold it into place so that by the time I get to my sewing machine, I'm not going to forget where I'm sewing, and I'm going to keep that edge as straight as possible. I will do this to both sides of the bunny bag. And when you're sewing, you are just going to go straight across that line, that base of the triangular line, and that's all you need to do. Remember, this is called a mitered edge or mitering. Now I am ready to turn my bunny bag inside out. I'm going to open it up from the open side of the lining, and I'm going to pull the entire bag through over to the right side. We're almost finished. We just have a couple of more steps to go before this bunny bag becomes a true bunny bag. Because the lining of the bag is still open, we are going to go ahead and fold it in about a 1/2 inch, and we're going to just do a straight stitch along this edge to close this up. When we're sewing this seam, we just want to sew close to the edge. If you sew too far on the inside, as in going towards the right side, then you will not secure those edges in the seam. So sew right along the edge. And when you're finished, go ahead and just tuck that lining on the inside of your bunny bag, just like this. And voila, your bunny bag is almost complete. This is where you can get really creative. If you have some scrap fabric lying around, you can cut them into different shapes to make eyes and nose and mouths. Or you can get a marker and draw a face on there. You can write anything you want. It is your bunny bag. You have the creative freedom to do whatever you want to do with it. We hoped you enjoyed sewing with us to make these fun bunny bags. Remember, be happy and create happy from the Creativity Show.